Hello, everybody. So I saw someone did this on Reddit, and I thought this would be kind of a cool idea. Actually, is doing a tier list for Suzerain. So initially, I was just going to use the Kaiserreich one because that's what he used. But then the problem with that is literally like half the cast would wind up in market liberal, because market liberal is such a like nebulous category, as that can include libertarians, that can include classical liberals, that can include liberal conservatives, and some stuff like that. You also have really you also have really awkward categories like national populist, which once again could mean anything. So, just to go through what I have, and this is kind of my version of the political spectrum, we have communism, so this would be Stalinism, Marxist Leninism, your basic dyed in the wool one party state, one party totalitarian state. I kept syndicalism because I think it does refer to fairly radical versions of socialism that aren't particularly authoritarian. We have Kurds in this, and Kurds often are kind of anarcho socialists. We also have, I forget what, Hegesland or whatever the island is that seems to be based off the Union of Britain. Radical socialist, I kept from Kaiserreich and Hearts of Iron, that is. Socialists got socialistic governments that are varying degrees of authoritarian. They can range from being completely authoritarian to guided democracy. Social Democrats, pretty straightforward. Social Liberal supports socially progressive values and some welfare state, leading slightly towards a welfare state and regulated economy. Classical Liberal, that should be pretty straightforward. Want minimal amount of government intervention in the economy and in the rest of society, civil rights and stuff like that, but less likely to support affirmative action or government attempts to pick winners and losers. Liberal conservative, a lot of people I think don't really necessarily get this category. So liberal conservatism is kind of the dominant strand in Western conservatism, at least in Anglo countries, since the 19th century. It tends to be it's people who are conservative, but they have somewhat liberal ideas. So they'll support a free market, civil rights, free trade, stuff like that. But they're also but they think that any kind of reform or freedom needs to be balanced with some sort of societal order. And the guiding principle is kind of pragmatism, wherein, and that's kind of like where you would get like the Canadian conservatives. That's like where you put Thatcher, Reagan, probably the W. Well, no, actually the W. Bushes. I don't even know where they would go on this scale because they're kind of weird. But yeah, so that's kind of the dominant strain of of conservatism in Western countries. Most normie conservative parties are that. We have social conservative, which is more centered on social issues. I kept this one from Kaiserreich. So this is people who are more concerned about social issues, religion, traditional gender rules, stuff like that, but they are less focused on a free market than a liberal conservative, and they're less committed to the idea of progress for progress's sake. I replaced paternal autocrat and authoritarian democrat with just authoritarian conservative. So this is just any conservative leaning government that is not democratic or is partially democratic. I like the term guided democracy because you'll have societies that have semi-legitimate elections, but they're overdetermined. The example I always like to use is Russia. Putin would easily win any election. Are elections in Russia probably rigged? To a certain extent, yes. They're probably rigged so United Russia gets, like, I don't know, 60% of this vote instead of like 50% of the vote. So that would include stuff like Franco. That would include Chiang Kai-shek, um, Putin today. I'm trying to think what are some other categories. Antonio Salazar, stuff like that. Augusto Pinochet. Then you have fascist, which you could say fascist or third positionist. I'm just using this as a general term for right wing ideologies that are more radical and are more kind of odd. That is, they combine revolutionary and conservative characteristics. I have a whole series of videos on where I try to define fascism. I do think you can. It is a meaningful category. So we're going to include that there. Now I'm going to warn you. Some of these characters I don't remember, so I'm going to have to just scroll through and try and figure out who some of these people are because they weren't really in the thing much. Okay, so let's start off with our first character. We have Minoli Sohil. I'm going to be honest, I don't entirely remember her. Looking at this, it says that she is a member of the People's Freedom and Justice Party who is more on the socialist side. So I'm just going to put her into the Social Democratic category. Okay. Sorry, I'll talk about some of these people in more depth. I just don't remember. I just tried to recall who some of these people even are. Because like I said, a lot of these people are not in it for very long. We will go with, let's see. Sorry, I'm just looking at the list. Maybe we'll take somebody major just to keep it going. Let's do Dwight Walker. So Dwight Walker seems very much to be based on, I think, Dwight Eisenhower. Well, his name is literally Dwight Walker. He seems to be kind of an amalgamation of different American presidents, like Eisenhower, Nixon, Truman, stuff like that. From what we can determine, he comes across as just being a really big free market guy, but also a very strong anti-communist. So he kind of, I think, represents like the generic American center-right from the 1950s and 1960s. So I think I'd probably put him in the liberal conservative category. Doesn't like communism, but generally speaking, likes free market. I'd imagine he probably has centrist to center-right social values. Social views is probably where I would estimate him to be. We have, let's see, who else? Who's next on the list? What is his name? Lecky? Let me just double check what his name is. Yeah, Mansoon Lecky. So the head of the, what is it? Can we get a quick overview of the scenario? Do you mean the scenario of Suzerain? Or... I went over the ideologies briefly. Okay, people want me to briefly go over Suzerain. So Suzerain is a political role-playing visual novel that takes place in a fictitious world that's based on 1940s to 1950s in our world. It takes place in the Republic of Swordland. The Republic of Swordland is kind of a mixture of a bunch of different things. It's primarily based on Turkey, but you also see aspects of Romania, Russia, just Eastern European countries in general. It has very much that kind of vibe. Swordland was a monarchy, but underwent a revolution in the 1920s. It then went through several waves of civil wars until Tarquin Sol came to power. Tarquin Sol ruled the country as basically a military dictator for about 20 years. Under that time period, he implemented Solism. Solism is basically conservatism, but with but with central planning. So Solism and kind of the mainstream right in Swordland are not socialists, but they're very strongly supportive of state ownership of the commanding heights of the economy, stuff like that. Maybe something like kind of Gaullism. It's primarily based off of Kemal Ataturk, but also probably leaders like Chiang Kai-shek or stuff like that. They're people who are not completely hostile to the idea of democracy, but prize social stability above of everything else. And within Swordland, because it's like Turkey, you have a minority called the Bloods. The Bloods, who are basically the Kurdish stand-ins, and the world is divided into the Archesian Treaty Organization and the Cortana Security Pact. The latter being communist and the previous being capitalistic. So Solism is fairly similar to Kemalism, or I guess you could say Sun Yat-sen's three principles of the people. It's less secular and less socially liberal. So Solists tend to be conservative but want a planned economy. There's a wide range of views, though. So who's next on the list? Let's go with Iosif. So Iosif is the Minister of Defense over the course of Suzerain. So I would actually put him probably in the social conservative category. Because he doesn't really seem to have any particular issues with... I think he's Minister of Defense. It's kind of confused. Or is he Chief of Staff? Yeah, Minister of Defense and Security. It can get a bit confusing between the two of them. So, he is your defense minister throughout the game. He's one of my personal favorite characters, even if he does kind of look like a pig. Generally speaking, he tends to be patriotic, anti-communist, has fairly kind of conservative ideas, but unlike a lot of the military, he seems to generally respect civilian government and civilian leadership of the military. And I think he will only undertake part of a coup as a temporary matter if your President Reign becomes like a communist or something like that. It's kind of interesting to note that with Iosif and a lot of the Solists, they want isolationism and third positionism, but they will accept if you join ATO. So if you join NATO, they don't like it, but they're willing to live with it. But if you try to join like the communists, they will coup you. So overall, I think he's just a very solid, patriotic, glad he didn't end my family when I got coup. Yeah, Iosif just seems to be a pretty normal, conservative, kind of representation of maybe the better aspects of the Turkish military. Let's see here. Who's next on our list? Let's do Nia. So I'm going to put Nia in the social liberal category. So Nia is a character who I disagree politically on a lot of stuff, but I like a lot as a person. She is your Minister of Justice, and she is a very idealistic, somewhat naive figure. She was, I believe, a lawyer before she became... I'm just going to double check her background. Yeah, she was a lawyer. Her thing is she wants social reforms to increase equality, but more than anything else, she's very focused on anti-corruption. So she tends to support democracy, social liberal causes, but her main issue is battling corruption and making the state more directly accountable. So I actually like her a lot as a character because, once again, it's someone who I don't agree with politically, but someone who I think is a good actor and legitimately wants what's best for the country. Let's see, who else do we have here? Walter Tusk. I think, is that his name? Walter Tusk? Some of these people have names that are so similar to real world people, I get them mixed up. Yeah, Walter Tusk. So I'm going to put him in the liberal conservative category. You might be seeing a pattern here. Basically, because he's an oligarch who supports the status quo as long as it's good for his company. His company is the biggest and most powerful around. So anything that is kind of liberal economic policies, but social order and in opposition to things like workers' rights or welfare or stuff like that, he tends to be pretty happy with. I would imagine overall, given his social standing and stuff, he's probably fairly conservative, or at least moderate on most social issues. Let's see here. Now, one of the hardest ones to do on this whole list is now in Kaiserreich. I couldn't really decide if I still had totalism, if he would be totalism or national populace. But we have Velik. Let me just double check if that's how you pronounce his name. Victor Smolak. So Victor Smolak is based on Saddam Hussein. So if this was Kaiserreich and you had totalism, I think you could make a case for him being totalist instead of being a national populist. Volin is based on Saddam Hussein's Iraq, but it is everything has a Polish flair to it, which is kind of a weird combination. But Baathism is a very interesting political ideology. It's something I've always wanted to do a video on. I would argue that it is the Middle Eastern version of fascism. So Baathism is basically a form of Arab cultural and civic nationalism, I think you can call it. Baathism means resurgence or renaissance. Baathism means resurgence or renaissance. The idea was in the aftermath of the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the World Wars to create a pan-Arab movement that would unite the Arab world. And it kind of borrows a bunch of stuff from different ideologies, like most forms of fascism. It's explicitly socialist and vanguardist, but it also stresses religious tolerance. The Baathists, despite being secular, hate atheism, and I think they tend to be fairly conservative on things like gender roles and stuff like that. So they are, I think, one of the best examples of a third positionist party. The various Ba'athist regimes you see is Assad, Syria, although it's kind of a bit different now, is Ba'athist, and Saddam Hussein's Iraq is. I would probably just put him in the fascist category. His state reminds me a bit of North Korea, or like I said, Iraq, or National Socialist Germany. Let's see here. Let's do the best character in the game, Serge. So Serge is the best character in the game. He is your driver, and I think he very much represents the average sword. Kind of a salt of the earth, hardworking guy who's somewhat parochial, and is generally speaking just, kind of your traditional kind of conservative working class guy who probably wants more workers' rights and stuff like that, and spending on stuff like infrastructure, but is patriotic, likes traditions, likes the old ways and stuff like that. Serge is just a very down-to-earth guy, and he's probably my favorite character in the whole game. He's just someone who is always there for you. There's something I think they added where if you get your wife pissed off at you and something else and a couple things happen, you can have Serge over and you eat pizza, drink beer, and watch soccer together, which sounds unbelievably based. That sounds like a really good evening. Okay, let's see. What else do we have here? Sorry, I'm just going to have to double check. Peter has no discernible political ideology, so I'm just going to put him in the liberal conservative category. If you look at the official political compass for Suzerain, he is right in the center. He really doesn't have anything. I say he's kind of a swamp creature, and his only ideology is just being loyal to Rain. Although his loyalty to Rain doesn't stop him from completely sabotaging your entire administration. He tends to be very much kind of a status quo guy who's more concerned about maintaining power and getting goodies and getting gifts for himself than any sort of political agenda. Um, Once again, he doesn't really express any kind of political views. I've seen some people put him here because of how much of a womanizer he is. I'm just comfortable putting him in kind of this vague, sort of conservative, sort of liberal category. Let's see. Who's next do we have on the list? Let's go with maybe Gus Manager. So I put Gus Manager probably in the classical liberal category. He's oh no, not Gus Manager. That is Simon Hull. Sorry, I get some of these people mixed up. Who is a politician and businessman who is your head of economy, commerce, and energy. So I'd probably put him in the classical liberal. I can't really recall him saying anything um, about like politics outside of stuff like the market. He just seems like he pretty much just wants smaller government, privatization. He also seems to be somewhat technocratic in his approach to the economy, relative to a lot of other characters. So I think it's pretty fair to just put Simon in there. You could maybe make a case for liberal conservative, because he did say that that Alfonso rushed the handling of it, and did things too quickly. I generally think that he would probably go into that category. Although once again, I think you can make the case for liberal conservative. Let's see who's next on the list. Let's do. Where's David? Where's David? Oh, okay. Michael Caronti. Now, we don't really know what his particular political views are. I don't think he ever really expresses them in any kind of depth. He just kind of does whatever he thinks will Marcel Caronti, whatever he thinks will help him out. He tends to be a very like aristocratic, kind of sophisticated guy who controls the media and kind of communication throughout it. I think it's implied that he works with the mafia, and some people think he killed his father. He's one of the three richest people in the country. So I think Marcel is largely just kind of a political opportunist. I'm going to put him here. I don't know if that's fair or he should be maybe in liberal conservative, but he seems like the kind of guy who values his traditional privileges and his and social stability so he can keep his power. He doesn't really care if you go down the Walter Tusk, I feel, is more concerned about economically free market policies, whereas Caronti just wants you to be left alone to run his company. Let's see here. We have. Yeah, the mafia is involved with that. I'm just trying to see here. Gloria Torrey. So I'm going to put her in the social conservative category. She is directly based on Margaret Thatcher, although this is the Gloria Torrey is a very conservative name. For those of you who aren't from from an English country, Tory is a slang term that is used for conservatives. So the Conservative Party of Canada will be called the Tory Party. The Conservative Party of the UK will be called the Tories, and stuff like that. Like back when the Conservative Party used to have something like that, they would be I'm trying to think of how to describe it. They were called blogging Tories. So that tends to be the byword. She just seems to be kind of a moderate conservative, despite being a woman and somewhat open to gender reform. She, generally speaking, seems to speak for conservative, rural and middle class voters who want mostly the status quo, maybe some kind of reforms, a bit more democratic, a bit more privatization, but generally speaking, as with most conservatives, prizing social stability above all everything else is kind of how I would describe her. Edwald Alfonso, another difficult character. I think I'm going to put him in the classical liberal camp because his time in office seemed to be marked by just a total commitment to attempting to liberalize the economy as rapidly as possible. If someone could maybe post the chat, I don't recall exactly what his social policies were. If they were conservative or liberal, or they just didn't have any strong uh, basis one way or another. Yeah, I don't think he. Looking at this, I don't think he really did much to change the political system. It seems like he was just more focused on privatizing the economy as quickly as possible. So you could say classical liberal. You could also make a case for liberal conservative. I feel though that his economic policies are a little too radical to be in this category. Let's see here. Just trying to see what to do next. So there's a bunch of. I'm trying to not do all the like important characters right away. Let's just say Leon Maleyev. Well, he's based on Trotsky, so we're just gonna put him into the communist category because he's directly. His name is even Leon. So we're just going to put him into this into that category because I think that's pretty straightforward. He's supposed to be a combination of Lenin, Trotsky, and Stalin. Who else do we have? Okay, Orso Hawker. So Orso Hawker is the chief. Someone's asking where Trump would be. Trump, I would probably put in. Trump's hard because he's a populist. The thing is, Trump doesn't identify himself as conservative. And while he champions a lot of conservative values, he doesn't really live them or make any pretense of living them. I'd probably put him in the liberal conservative category because he tends to be pretty free market, pretty pro social stability stuff like law and order. I guess the differences where he would have is he would be more in favor of stuff like tariffs and immigration restriction and stuff like that. So I think you could probably put Trump in either of these categories, but he's kind of very hard to define. He would definitely not be in the fascist category. I've done multiple videos about that. Nothing about Trump's platform is very radical or unusual for American conservatives. Stuff like immigration restriction, protectionism, isolationism, and things like that are all very common to conservatives throughout American history. They're not like some radical new thing that he came up with. If anything, you could kind of argue that he is returning the society, the conservative movement, to where it was before the neocons took over. Okay, let's see here. I'm just going through. Lucien, I'm gonna say we could put Lucien in either liberal. We'll put him in liberal conservative. Once again, he's another political pragmatist who doesn't seem to like extremes of either side. When asked about things, I find he tends to give a very moderate, middle of the road opinion. His goal is primarily based on just doing whatever he thinks the polls or what want you to do or whatever would be political expedient more than anything else. But I find if you tend to take like radical like nationalist or fascistic policies, he doesn't like that. Or if you take very liberal policies, he doesn't like that. He basically just kind of wants to give Swordland a facelift, get the constitutional package passed, more so for prestige than any real commitment to reform. So I think you could probably just put him in the kind of generic moderate conservative category for lacking any strong beliefs but not wanting society to go through another revolution. Let's see here. We have the head of the PFSJ, let me see, where is he? I'm trying to remember what his name is again. No, it's not Dwight Walker. We already went over him. Franz Richter. So I'm going to put him into the classical liberal category. He appears to be more or less right in the center of the People's Justice and Freedom Party, which seems to be a mixture of social liberals, social democrats, and classical liberals. They're kind of a weird mesh of stuff. They're just kind of, and this does kind of happen sometimes in conservative societies. We'll just have this weird mixture of people who form together into an opposition movement, even if they really have some deep internal contradictions between them. The PFJF, or however you pronounce it, seems to be more based around the idea of liberalizing social policy and democratizing society than any sort of strong economic position. They tend to be more liberal than what you have because Swordland basically has a planned economy at the moment. So you have people who range from wanting a mixed economy to people who want a full economy. Okay, so let's go with our two. So we have Remus Holstrom, and what was the other guy's name? Who's the other head of the National Front? Is it Corso and Corso Keebner? So interestingly, I find we don't really have a ton of understanding of what the National Front actually believes in. My understanding is they're based on the National Movement Party from Turkey, which is an outgrowth of the Grey Wolves, which was a fascist terrorist group who killed leftist intellectuals and stuff like that. I'm going to just put them in that category because they're based off of basically a real-world fascist party. So I think that is probably accurate. As far as what their policies go, they tend to be ethno-nationalistic, supporting a strong military. They have, if you want to go down the dictator route and coalition partner with them, they have the young swords. You can get them to form right-wing death squads and kill your political opponents. And they tend to support you if you go down the dictatorship run. Now, someone pointed out something interesting to me that I never really thought about. The National Front seems to be okay if you join the ATO. So if you join the NATO equivalent, they seem to be all right with that, and it doesn't really bother them. I think because they're more primarily concerned about just killing commies than anything else. So they're more in favor of that. But also, like, soulism is nationalistic, but it's civic nationalism. They're all full-on ethno-nationalists. And they talk about purple blood, and some countries they like because they're more ethnically similar to the swords, and some countries they dislike. So I'm just going to put them into that category. I think that is fair. Okay, who else do we have here? I will also put, I think his name is that Velkin? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There's a lot of characters in this game. Yeah, Vulcan Kruger. I'm also going to put Vulcan Kruger into this category. He is the chief of staff. In contrast to Iosif, he tends to be much more confrontational, much more opposed to the idea of subjugating the military to any kind of civilian control, and ready to basically coup you at the back about of an eye. He also tends to be a war hawk and wants to go to war at the first sign. Yosef tends to be a very like he wants to respond. He wants Swordland to look strong, but he's also like a rational figure. So if you tell him to avoid trying to start something with Rumberg or to like avoid provocation or stuff like that, he will listen to you and he will do it. He doesn't want Swordland to get pushed around or seem weak, but he also gets that like starting a war for no reason doesn't help anybody. Whereas I feel that Vulcan is definitely more of the we have to start war, Greater Swordland, 1488 type of person. Let's see, who else do we have? I just forgot what I was saying with Orso Hawker. I think I just completely like blanked. So Orso Hawker is the basically the big bad of Suzerain. Although you could also argue that Beatrice Livingston could be the big bad of Suzerain. So he is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So when Colonel Sol was in power, he made the Soulless Constitution, which is this weird chimera of different stuff. But the ultimate power in society lies with the President and the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court justices serve for life. They cannot be impeached or otherwise removed. The Supreme Court justices have basically veto over all legislation. They can impeach a president, and they can block any changes to the Constitution. So the Supreme Court are basically kind of like the American Supreme Court. They have absolute power, and they can do whatever they want. Orso Hawker is also the head of the deep state. There is a massive deep state in Suzerain that you have to deal with. In my playthrough, I probably played basically as like a social conservative. So I wasn't even really reformist. The reforms I wound up doing actually made the president more powerful, or made the president appear on paper to be less powerful, but really just codified his powers. Like, I replaced the absolute veto with a supermajority veto, which I don't really think like makes that much of a difference. I removed the ability of the Supreme Court to no, I said the Supreme Court can impeach the president, but only if it's the Supreme Court and the House, the National Assembly. So theoretically, that's expanding the number of people who are the president is accountable to, on one hand, but on the other, it's much, much harder to impeach the president on both of those accounts. So Hawker will come in pretty early on in the game and try to gaslight you into passing a state of emergency bill, declaring a state of emergency. He will, however, snake on you the first chance he gets, and it's very hard, I find, to do an autocrat run. Okay, let's see here. We have... Just going to look back at this. Let's see. Pascal Venewolf. Where is Pascal? So Pascal is a very... whenever I look at Pascal, just the term nice guy comes to mind. He's just a very pleasant guy. He is a former... I think he is a doctor. Let me see. I think he's a doctor. He's a labor active. No, he's not a doctor. Okay. He is a labor activist, a health activist, and stuff like that. He's primarily, I guess you could kind of call him a economic center left guy. So he wants workers' rights, social security, regulations. He wants to build new rural He cares a lot about rural health care, medical facilities, technological development, um, mandatory vaccines, stuff like that. He is, I think, a social liberal, but he's more just kind of like a man of the people, and very much. He was like an author who wrote a whole bunch of stuff. He wrote something called The Unfortunate Man, which I think is based on The Forgotten Man, about a family of poverty-stricken miners. So yeah, I'd put him in the social democratic category. There's nothing particularly radical about him, but I think he's more in favor of direct government intervention than maybe someone like Neo. David Wishashi, how do you pronounce his last name? Uh, a lot of the names are just, yeah, David Wishy. I'm also going to put him into the social liberal category. Once again, he's a very pleasant old man. He's one of my favorite characters in the game. His father was the first president of Swordland after the monarchy was overthrown. I just, generally speaking, find him to be very much the old statesman. Well, his views are kind of liberal in tone. The fact that he's an old man makes him a lot more kind of mild and moderate. Generally speaking, though, I think you could say he's like a technocrat or like a professional diplomat. And his main goal is to just provide you with the best advice possible. Even if he does pretty obviously lean one way or another, he's just kind of a consummate professional and a really solid dude on a whole. Let's see here. We have who is the head of the Union of Vegas Land or the Union of Britain? I think his father was pretty ideologically similar to him, so I'm just going to put him there as well. Where's Bernard Circus? Bernard Circus gets taken down at the beginning of the game. To my understanding, he was a communist, so I'm just going to put up there. We don't really have a ton of information about him. Curtin Lesty is a mayor from the United Sorland Party. Let's see, where is he? He can go off and join the. Wait a minute. Do they have him twice? I guess they have Bernard Circus twice. I'm going to put him probably in the authoritarian conservative category because he's part of the conservative wing. He will join the National Front if you try to go down a reformist path. Hegel, that's his name, Hegel. So my understanding is Vegas Land is a... Yeah, there we go, Emmerich Hegel. Vegas Land is based off of the Union of Britain. So it tends to be more liberal and laid back and a bit more decentralized and less authoritarian. So I'm going to put him into syndicalism because my understanding is that's kind of what it's at the moment. I think they have like Vegas Land Socialism, which I'm just looking at this. Yeah, decentralized structure based on labor union federations and people's assemblies rather than vanguardism. That is syndicalism basically to a T. So he's going to go into that category. Monica Rain. I think that this is pretty uncontroversial. She's going to go into the social liberal category. She's kind of an obnoxious feminist. The problem with her reform package that she gives you is that 3 of the 4, like, she basically married you and became your supported you throughout the years because she wanted to pass women's rights legislation, or she calls it the Women's Liberation Act, when you become president. Now, the issue with it is there are aspects of it I support, and but there's one big poison pill in it. So the four provisions of the act are as follows. Number one, making domestic violence illegal. Okay, that's fine with me. 100%. That sounds good. Okay. Apparently, that's a big problem, particularly in the bloodish parts of the country. Okay, that's fine. Number two, reforming education so you don't have separate education for girls and boys. I honestly don't really have that big an issue with that. With them having a similar curriculum for male and female students, that doesn't particularly bother me. As I've said, I don't think the issue with feminism is necessarily allowing like women educational opportunities. The issue is that like affirmative action in the economic structure disincentivizes having families. The third one is paid maternity leave, which once again I'm not even necessarily against. I don't think it's ideal, but it's at least a social policy that would actually help some people who aren't complete degenerates. Like you might have some evangelical or Catholic or decent people who could make good use of that. The fourth one is affirmative action, though, and so I had to veto the bill based on that. Like I could get on board with the previous three; those don't seem that unreasonable to me. But I no, there's no way affirmative action is being put into place. It's funny though because she is, despite being like a feminist, she's kind of like a first wave feminist. So some of the more radical people she deals with, she clearly feels kind of uncomfortable around, and she obviously doesn't mind her position, even if she's kind of gaslit herself into thinking she does. She doesn't really seem to mind being a mother and raising her kids and stuff like that. It's more the opportunity for other people. She's kind of confused politically. Keep in mind, though, Swordland is not a very. The left is not particularly strong in Swordland, so it's not as big a deal. Let's see, who else do we have? Beatrice Livingston. We don't really know that much about Rumburg. Rumburg is a absolute monarchy that is a constitutional monarchy on paper. It is a weird mixture. So Rumburg is one of the few countries that doesn't have a direct real world equivalent. It is mostly based on Imperial Russia, but everybody has British names. So it's kind of weird. It's the world's third superpower after the American and Soviet Union stand-in. I'd probably put her in that category because Rumsburg seems like a fairly conservative country, but not fascistic because it's under a monarchy as opposed to any kind of weird one-party state. Let me see. So we're down to a lot of the people I just don't know what their names are. I know who they are. Like I could place them. I just kind of want to know. Heron Garci, the another Supreme Court member, I'd put him maybe in the social conservative category. So he is a solist. He is a corrupt member of the Supreme Court. To a certain extent, though, he's not really ideologically committed to anything other than lining his own pockets. So if you make it so that you can remove Hawker and make him Supreme Court Justice, despite his political views, he will support your reform agenda. So I'm just going to put him there because he's definitely conservative leaning, but also, yeah. We have Gus Manager. I think he is. He is from a family of old landowners. He wants to invest in his home region. Let's see here. I'm going to put him into the classical liberal category because I think that's he's very similar to uh, the other guy there. Who do we have left? Like some of these other people, I don't think even really matter. I don't even remember who they are, so I'm just gonna throw some of them. I think she's like a liberal Supreme Court justice. Like Frank and your daughter don't have a political ideology. This dude, Soy Boy. I'm trying to remember what Soy Boy's name is, but he is kind of a disgusting creature, and if I could, I would purge him from the United Swordland Party. I'm trying to remember what his name is. Oh, we're just gonna call him Soy Boy for now. So he is the head of the reformist wing, Albin Clevin, who is the head of the liberal wing or the reformist wing of the United Swordland Party. He is a liberal. He is also extremely corrupt and just wants. You can bribe him really, really easily. He's kind of the equivalent to the other guy. I don't know. So I don't know who like a lot of these other people are, so I'm just gonna put them into some categories. I don't remember who he is. Okay, let's get to the final couple people who actually matter. So we have Lilith Graff. So you could make a case for social conservative. I'm probably going to put her into authoritarian conservative. So she is basically the most hardcore of the hardcore soulless supporters. It opposes any kind of attempts to change the Constitution or denigrate the legacy of Soul. A lot of people think that she was Soul's lover while he was in office, which I think there's a very high possibility that that is true. She basically just she's a social conservative, a religious conservative, opposes any attempt to carry out free market reforms, and basically just wants to keep the country the way it is. She is one of the leaders of the deep state who will try to gaslight you and undermine your reign at every opportunity. So I'm going to put her into that category. We have Morgan. No, not Morgan. Mia Morgan. Oh, what's her name again? What is show prep, anyways? What is show prep? Show prep is for people with weak minds. It's not Monica. Oh, Sierra Walda. So I'm actually going to put her into the radical socialist category. She seems to be probably the like most left wing mainstream politician you come across, having very radical opinions on social class, gender relations, religion, stuff like that. There's a really cringy scene where someone says like "God bless Colonel Soul," and she just gets really triggered by it and upset by it, and she's like, "This is a secular country," um, or whatever. I think she also insists on wearing pants as like a symbol that she doesn't. She's just completely like anti anything else. I'm just trying to think. Does any of these people matter other than Colonel Soul? No, I don't think. I don't know. Any of these other people matter. So we're gonna go with Colonel Soul as our last main person. So we're of course gonna put him into the authoritarian conservative category. Because well, that's what Soul basically is. Soulism is, as I've said, a authoritarian statist ideology that is also focuses on civic nationalism, generally speaking fairly conservative social values. I think that Soul himself is secular or irreligious. but generally speaking, supports social conservatism and religion. Is okay with it. Yeah, so basically, still is a national conservative. Like I said, he's based on Ataturk, Chiang Kai shek, a lot of just kind of very pragmatic characters. You, if you look at the official Suzerain chart, and we'll take a look at it in a moment, but they have him as Solist, which is basically authoritarian conservative, and then central planning. So let's see here. Let's just give me one sec. Okay. Okay, so this is the official one they put out, and someone tried to uh, explain it. So you have Gloria Tory, and the National Front up here. Once again, Solism is authoritarian and social conservatism. Reformism is social liberalism and pro-democracy. Then you have capitalism and communism on one side or another. So when I did it, I think I was there. I was under National Capitalists when in my particular run. So let's see how I did compared to how they officially put people. So Gloria Tory, I put in the let's just do a comparison. So I put Gloria Tory in social conservatism. Yep, that's pretty much exactly where she belongs. I put these two guys in the fascist category. Yep, that's correct. Sol and Lilius Graf are both in the authoritarian conservative category. Yep, that makes sense. I forget what that guy's name is. I put Lucky down in the. He's like an anarcho-communist, so yeah, he belongs down in there. I put him in the syndicalist category, so that makes sense. I put Franz Richter in the classical liberal. Yep, so that makes sense. They don't have a lot of people here. Alfonso, yeah, that makes sense too. So I think all of mine are in line with what people had said. Now I think somebody did a more comprehensive one. So let's see what the more comprehensive one. Oh no, they don't have the characters there. I think that's the rest of the characters that we don't see elsewhere. So yeah, they seem to agree with me on most of these. Yeah, Nia's in the. I put that in like the social liberal category. I'd probably put her a little further to the left, but I think that makes sense. Dwight Walker is basically where I had him. Yeah, so I think by and large, most of my picks were pretty similar to what other people went with. So, anyways, I hope people enjoyed the video. I hope people found it interesting. I know there's a couple other people, but honestly, I can't even remember who they are, and I don't think it's really worth it to try to go through them. So, God bless everybody.